Dr. Zara felt her crystalline skin shimmer with anticipation as she walked through the polished corridors of the diplomatic vessel. Today was the day she had been preparing for her entire career. The first official meeting with humans was about to begin, and she was the lead scientist assigned to study these mysterious newcomers to the galaxy. She paused at her reflection in the metallic walls, at nearly 8 feet tall, with her species' natural crystal armor gleaming under the ship's lights. She cut an impressive figure. The Altarians were known throughout the galaxy as one of the most advanced species, both intellectually and physically. Her people had been exploring space for over 3,000 years, meeting dozens of different alien races along the way. But humans, they were completely new. Zara pulled up the preliminary reports on her datapad as she made her way to the observation deck. The information was sparse but consistent. Humans appeared to be small creatures, averaging only 5 to 6 feet in height. They had soft, pinkish skin with no natural armor or protective shells. No claws, no fangs, no poisonous spines. Just smooth, vulnerable flesh wrapped around what appeared to be a fairly basic skeletal structure. How did they even survive on their own planet? She wondered aloud. Scrolling through the biological data, their homeworld, Earth, seemed pleasant enough. But every planet had its dangers. Without natural weapons or defenses, it was puzzling how they had managed to become the dominant species. The ship's announcement system crackled to life. All diplomatic personnel to the main conference hall. The human delegation has arrived. Zara's excitement grew as she made her way to the meeting area. The conference hall was massive, designed to accommodate the various sizes and needs of different species. The Kregan representatives were already there, their 12-foot frames making even her feel small. Their thick, rocky skin and massive claws marked them as natural warriors. Next to them sat the Vorthic delegation, encased in their beetle-like natural armor that could deflect most energy weapons. Then she saw him. The human ambassador stood near the entrance, and Zara had to look twice to make sure she wasn't missing something. He was exactly as the reports described, maybe even smaller than she had expected. The man wore simple, dark clothing that seemed to hide rather than enhance his frame. His hair was black with touches of gray, and his skin looked impossibly soft. Compared to the other species in the room, Ambassador Chen, according to her notes, he looked so ordinary. As the formal introductions began, Zara found herself studying the human with scientific fascination. He moved quietly, without the thunderous footsteps of the Kregans or the clicking sounds of the Vorthic's armored limbs. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured, lacking the booming authority of the larger species. On behalf of humanity, Ambassador Chen said, "I thank you all for welcoming us to this historic gathering. We look forward to learning from your wisdom and experience." Several of the other delegates exchanged glances that Zara didn't miss. The Kregan war chief, a massive being named Tak, leaned forward in his specially reinforced chair. "Tell us, small one," Tak rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "What makes your people think they belong among the great powers of the galaxy? What have you conquered? What enemies have you crushed?" Zara watched Ambassador Chen's reaction carefully. The human didn't flinch or show any sign of intimidation, despite being dwarfed by the Kregan's massive presence. Instead, he smiled slightly, an expression that seemed both polite and mysterious. "We have conquered our own limitations," Chen replied simply, "and we have learned that the greatest victories often come not from crushing enemies, but from understanding them." The response seemed to puzzle some of the delegates. The Vorthic representative, whose translator made his voice sound mechanical, clicked his mandibles in what Zara recognized as dismissive laughter. "Understanding," the Vorthic said, "does not stop claws or deflect plasma fire. How does your species defend itself? Where are your weapons, your armor?" Chen gestured to his simple clothing. "We prefer to rely on our minds rather than our shells. Our weapons are our intelligence, our adaptability, and our ability to work together." Zara made notes on her datapad, but found herself growing more curious rather than getting answers. The humans' responses were diplomatically perfect. but they told her nothing about how his species had actually survived and thrived. She had studied countless species over her career, and she had never encountered one that seemed so unremarkable from a physical standpoint. Throughout the day's sessions, she continued to observe. The human delegation consisted of 5 members, and they all shared the same basic characteristics: small, soft, apparently fragile. They wore simple clothes that covered most of their bodies, unlike many species who proudly displayed their natural armor or impressive physical features. But there was something else she noticed. Despite their small size, the humans seemed remarkably calm and alert. Their eyes were constantly moving, taking in details of the room, the other delegates, even the ship's structure. It was subtle, but unmistakable once she started looking for it. During a break in the formal discussions, Zara approached Ambassador Chen up close. He seemed even more ordinary. She towered over him by nearly 3 feet, and her crystalline exoskeleton caught the light in a way that usually impressed other species. But Chen looked up at her with those strange, soft eyes showing no fear or intimidation. "I hope you don't mind," she said, "but I'm quite curious about your species. From a scientific perspective, we have so little information about human biology and culture." "Not at all," Chen replied warmly. "We're equally curious about all of you. It's fascinating to see how differently life can evolve across the galaxy. May I ask," Zara continued, "how your people managed to become the dominant species on your world? Forgive me if this sounds rude, but from our preliminary data, humans appear to lack the natural advantages that most apex species possess." Chen's smile grew wider, and for just a moment, something flickered in his eyes that made Zara's scientific instincts take notice. It was gone so quickly she almost missed it. But there had been something there, something that seemed far more complex than the simple diplomat standing before her. "That's a very good question," Chen said. "I suppose the answer depends on how you define advantages. We've learned that being the biggest or strongest isn't always the most important thing. Sometimes, it's better to be the most persistent." Before Zara could ask what he meant by that, the formal sessions resumed. But as she took her seat, she found herself thinking about that brief moment when something had shifted in the ambassador's expression, something that suggested there was far more to humans than their simple appearance indicated. As the day wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone in the room, including herself, was missing something important about these strange new beings called humans. Something that might change everything once they understood what it was. The next morning brought more diplomatic meetings, but Zara found herself watching Ambassador Chen with new eyes. She had spent the night reviewing every piece of data about humans, and the more she learned, the more questions she had. During the breakfast gathering, she noticed something interesting. While the other species delegates ate their meals with typical behavior, the humans were different. They didn't just eat, they observed. Their eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the room, every movement of the other delegates, even the serving staff moving quietly in the background. "They're always watching," she murmured to herself, making notes on her datapad. The morning session focused on trade agreements, and Zara watched as Ambassador Chen navigated the complex negotiations. The Kregan representative, Tak, was pushing for exclusive mining rights on several planets. His massive fist slammed on the table, making the entire structure shake. "These worlds have resources we need," Tak roared. "The strong should take what they require." The smallest species delegates shrank back from his display of power. Even some of the Vorthix seemed intimidated by the Kregan's raw aggression. But Chen remained perfectly calm, his hands folded peacefully on the table. "With respect, Tak," Chen said quietly, "taking what you need and taking what you want are very different things. Perhaps we could find a solution that benefits everyone." What happened next surprised Zara. Instead of matching Thok's aggression or backing down in fear, Chen began speaking in a low, steady voice. He outlined a plan that would give the Kregans access to the resources they needed while protecting the smaller species' interests. His words were soft, but somehow they carried more weight than all of Thok's shouting. By the end of the discussion, The massive Kregan war chief was nodding in agreement. Zara realized she had just witnessed something remarkable. The human hadn't used strength or intimidation. He had used something else entirely after the morning session. There was a break. Zara decided to follow Chen as he walked through the ship's corridors. She wanted to observe him when he thought no one was watching. The ambassador made his way to the observation deck, where large windows showed the stars streaming past. He stood there quietly, just looking out at space. Zara positioned herself where she could watch him without being obvious. That's when the accident happened. A group of Kregan Jr. delegates was walking past, carrying one of their ceremonial warhammers. The weapon was massive, weighing at least 200 pounds, and covered in sharp metal spikes. Suddenly, one of the young Kregans stumbled, and the hammer went flying through the air. It was heading straight for a small Altarian child who had wandered onto the observation deck. With her parents, Zara started to move, but she was too far away. The hammer would hit the child before anyone could reach her. The little girl looked up at the falling weapon with wide, frightened eyes. Then Chen moved. Zara had never seen anything like it. The human ambassador launched himself forward with explosive speed, covering the distance in what seemed like an instant. He didn't try to catch the massive hammer or deflect it. Instead, he scooped up the child and rolled away, using his own body to shield her from the impact. The hammer crashed into the floor where the child had been standing, leaving a deep crater in the metal decking. For a moment, everyone was silent. Then Chen stood up, still holding the frightened child, and gently handed her back to her parents. The little girl was completely unharmed. "Is everyone okay?" Chen asked calmly. As if nothing unusual had happened, the Kregan delegates were stammering apologies, but Zara barely heard them. She was staring at the human ambassador, her mind racing. The speed he had shown, the precision of his movements, the way he had positioned his body to protect the child. It spoke of reflexes and awareness that went far beyond what his appearance suggested. Later that afternoon, Zara found herself walking with Chen through the ship's cultural section. The walls were lined with artifacts from different species, and they talked about the various civilizations represented on the ship. "You move very well for a diplomat," Zara said carefully. Chen glanced at her with that same mysterious smile. "Thank you. I suppose old habits are hard to break." "What kind of habits?" "Oh, staying aware of your surroundings, being ready to react quickly. Things you learn when you grow up on a world where anything can happen." Zara wanted to ask more, but something in Chen's tone suggested he wasn't going to elaborate. Instead, she decided to try a different approach. "I've been reading about human culture," she said. "You have some interesting recreational activities, swimming, for instance. Most species either have natural water adaptations or avoid water completely. Swimming is one of our favorite pastimes," Chen agreed. "There's something peaceful about being in the water. It's also excellent exercise, physical conditioning, keeping our bodies strong and flexible. Many humans swim regularly to maintain their health." Zara's scientific curiosity was fully engaged now. "How fascinating. And this requires removing your clothing?" Chen nodded. "Our regular clothes would make swimming difficult. We have special garments designed for water activities." "I've never observed aquatic exercise before," Zara said, trying to sound casual. "The ship has pool facilities, doesn't it?" "Yes, excellent ones. I was planning to swim later this evening, actually. It helps me think more clearly after long diplomatic sessions." As they continued walking, Zara found herself thinking about everything she had observed, the way Chen moved during the accident, his constant awareness of his surroundings, the respect he commanded from much larger, apparently stronger beings. There was definitely more to humans than their simple appearance suggested. That evening, as she prepared for sleep, Zara made a decision. Her scientific training had taught her that the most important discoveries often came from direct observation. If she wanted to understand humans better, she needed to see them in their natural element. She would visit the pool facilities tomorrow evening, not to intrude, but to observe, to finally get some answers about these mysterious beings who had managed to reach the stars, despite appearing so fragile and small. Something told her that what she discovered might change everything she thought. She knew about strength, survival, and what it really meant to be a successful species in this vast, dangerous galaxy. The next evening, Sarah made her way to the ship's recreational facilities. Her heart was beating faster than usual. Though she told herself it was purely scientific excitement, she had spent the entire day thinking about Ambassador Chen and the questions that kept multiplying in her mind. The recreational area was located on one of the ship's lower decks, designed to accommodate the various needs of different species. As she approached the pool section, she could hear the gentle sound of water movement echoing through the corridors. She positioned herself behind a viewing panel that allowed her to observe the pool area without being seen. The lighting was softer here, designed to create a relaxing atmosphere. The pool itself was impressive, large enough for even the biggest species to use comfortably. At first, she didn't see anyone. Then she heard footsteps approaching from the changing area, and Ambassador Chen emerged. Zara's breath caught in her throat. Everything she thought she knew about humans was wrong. Gone was the simple diplomatic clothing that had made Chen appear small and unremarkable. Without the loose-fitting garments, his true form was revealed, and it was nothing like what she had expected. His frame wasn't weak or fragile. It was compact. Yes, but every inch of it spoke of incredible efficiency. Muscles moved beneath his skin in perfect coordination, not bulky like a Kregan's, but dense and precisely defined. His shoulders were broader than his clothing had suggested. His arms showed the kind of development that came from years of serious physical conditioning. But it was the scars that really caught her attention. They were everywhere. Not fresh wounds, but old marks that had healed long ago. A long line across his ribs. Several smaller marks on his arms and legs. A particularly noticeable one across his left shoulder blade. Each scar told a story of survival, of battles fought and won. What kind of diplomat has scars like that? Zara whispered to herself. Chen approached the pool with the same quiet confidence she had observed in the diplomatic meetings. But now she understood what she was seeing. It wasn't just confidence. It was the awareness of someone who had learned to survive in dangerous situations. He dove into the water with fluid grace, and Zara watched in amazement as he began to swim. She had never seen anything like it. His movements were so smooth, so efficient, that he seemed to glide through the water without effort. Every stroke was perfect, every movement calculated for maximum effectiveness. As she watched, she began to understand something fundamental about human design. Their size wasn't a limitation, it was an advantage in the water. Chen moved with a speed and agility that would be impossible for larger species. His compact frame cut through the water like it was built for this exact purpose. But there was more. As he swam, she could see the incredible control he had over his body. He could change direction instantly, accelerate without warning, or stop completely and float motionless. It was like watching a master craftsman at work. Except the craft was his own physical form. Chen swam for nearly an hour, and Zara watched. Every minute of it, she began to see patterns in his movements, techniques that spoke of serious training. This wasn't recreational swimming. This was the kind of conditioning that came from a lifetime of preparation for something much more demanding than diplomatic meetings. When he finally emerged from the pool, water streaming from his compact frame, Zara found herself reassessing everything she thought she knew about human biology. The soft skin she had dismissed as weakness was actually an incredibly sophisticated system. She could see how it managed heat, how it provided feedback about the environment, how it worked with the underlying muscle structure to create an amazingly efficient organism. The lack of natural armor or weapons wasn't a flaw. It was a choice made by evolution. Humans had traded raw physical power for something much more valuable: adaptability. They could function in environments that would challenge any other species. They could modify their capabilities through training and conditioning. They could survive and thrive in situations that would destroy more specialized creatures. As Chen toweled off and prepared to leave, Zara noticed something else. Even in this relaxed setting, his eyes never stopped moving. He was constantly aware of his surroundings, processing information, staying ready for anything that might happen. It was so subtle that she almost missed it, but once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. This wasn't just a diplomat who happened to be in good physical condition. This was something else entirely, someone who had been trained not just to survive, but to excel in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. When Chen finally left the pool area, Sarah remained hidden behind the viewing panel. Her mind racing, she pulled out her data pad and began making notes, trying to process what she had observed. Human physiology is far more sophisticated than preliminary reports suggested, she wrote. Compact frame appears to be optimized for efficiency rather than raw power. Muscle density indicates serious physical conditioning. Numerous healed scars suggest extensive combat or survival experience. Movement patterns indicate advanced training in physical disciplines. She paused, stylus hovering over her data pad. Combat experience? Survival training? These were not the characteristics of a peaceful diplomatic species. What exactly had humans been doing on their home world before they reached the stars? The more she thought about it, the more questions arose. If humans were this physically capable, why did they present themselves as weak and harmless? Why hide their true nature behind simple clothing and diplomatic politeness? As she made her way back to her quarters, Zara realized that tomorrow's diplomatic sessions were going to be very different. She would be watching Ambassador Chen with completely new eyes, looking for signs of the capabilities she had just witnessed. But more than that, she was beginning to understand that humanity's rival in galactic politics might be far more significant than anyone had imagined. A species that could appear harmless while possessing such hidden depths was either very wise or very dangerous, possibly both. That night, as she lay in her sleeping chamber, Zara couldn't shake the image of those scars. Each one represented a story she didn't know, a challenge overcome, a situation survived. Tomorrow, she decided she would find a way to learn more about the real history of humanity, because something told her that the universe was about to discover that these small, soft creatures were far more than they appeared to be. The next morning brought an urgent announcement that shattered the peaceful atmosphere of the diplomatic vessel. Zara was reviewing her notes from the previous evening when the ship's emergency system activated all delegates to secure quarters. Immediately, security situation in progress. Zara's crystalline skin flickered with concern as she made her way toward the main diplomatic areas. Through the corridors, she could hear shouting and the sound of heavy footsteps. Something was very wrong. She found a safe viewing position near the main conference hall and watched as the situation unfolded. A group of Vorthic separatists had somehow gained access to the ship. These weren't the official delegates, but radical members of their species, who opposed any cooperation with what they called inferior races. The separatists were massive, even by Vorthic standards. Their natural beetle-like armor gleamed under the ship's lights, and their clawed limbs could tear through most materials. They had surrounded the human delegation in the center of the conference hall. "You will serve as proof," their leader declared, his voice booming through a translator. "When we show the galaxy how easily we can defeat these soft creatures, everyone will understand that only the strong deserve to rule among the stars." Zara counted at least 8 separatists, each one weighing several times more than any human. Their armor could deflect energy weapons, and their claws could slice through metal. This wasn't a fair fight. It was a demonstration of overwhelming force. Ambassador Chen stood calmly in the center of the circle, along with 4 other human delegates. They looked impossibly small compared to their captors, but something about their posture made Zara take a closer look. The humans weren't cowering. They weren't begging for mercy or showing any signs of panic. Instead, they were doing something that seemed almost impossible under the circumstances. They were communicating, not with words, but with tiny gestures, subtle movements, glances that lasted only seconds. Zara watched in fascination as the 5 humans used a complex system of silent signals to coordinate their actions. It was so subtle that even she almost missed it, and she was looking for it. "You have made a serious mistake," Chen said quietly to the Vorthic leader. The separatist laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the hall. The mistake was thinking your species deserved to be here. We will correct that error. What happened next changed everything Zara thought she knew about violence, strategy, and the nature of predators. Chen moved first, but not in the way she expected. Instead of attacking the largest enemy, he targeted the separatist stance, striking at a joint in the leg armor that caused the massive creature to stumble. In that same instant, the other humans moved with perfect coordination. They didn't fight like the other species Zara had observed. The Kriegans relied on brute strength, smashing through problems with raw power. The Vorthig used their natural weapons and armor to overwhelm opponents, but the humans fought like something else entirely. They fought like hunters. Each human targeted a different enemy, but they worked together as a single unit. They moved through spaces too small for the larger creatures, struck at weak points with surgical precision, and used their opponent's size and weight against them. Zara watched in amazement as Chen slid between a separatist's legs, striking at nerve clusters that caused the creature's claws to go numb. Another human used a Vorthig's own momentum to send the massive being crashing into his companions. They moved like water, flowing around obstacles, striking where they were least expected. But it was more than just technique. As the fight continued, Zara began to understand something terrifying about human nature. These weren't just skilled fighters, they were something far more dangerous. They were intelligent predators. Every move was calculated, every strike served a purpose. They weren't just trying to survive the encounter. They were systematically dismantling their opponents, turning the separatists' advantages into weaknesses. The Vorthig had expected easy prey instead. They found themselves facing creatures that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution. To be the most efficient hunters in the galaxy, humans might be small, but they were persistent predators. They didn't need to be the strongest, they just needed to be smarter, faster, and more adaptable than anything they faced. One by one, the separatists fell, not destroyed, but neutralized with a precision that spoke of extensive training and natural ability. The humans used just enough force to end the threat, no more and no less. When the last separatist was down, the 5 humans regrouped in the center of the hall. They weren't even breathing hard. Chen straightened his diplomatic clothing as if nothing unusual had happened. Ship security. He said calmly into his communication device, "We have 8 individuals who will need medical attention and secure custody." Zara stared at the scene, her mind struggling to process what she had witnessed. The humans had just defeated 8 heavily armed opponents without using any weapons of their own. They had done it with nothing but intelligence, coordination, and skills that seemed to come as naturally as breathing. As security teams arrived to handle the defeated separatists, Zara noticed something else. The other species delegates who had witnessed the fight were looking at the humans with expressions she had never seen before. The mixture of respect, fear, and awe on their faces told her that everyone's perspective had just changed dramatically. Later, as the ship returned to normal operations, Zara found herself walking alongside Ambassador Chen once again. He seemed completely calm, as if the morning's events had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "That was remarkable," she said carefully. Chen glanced at her with that same mysterious smile. "What was remarkable?" "The way you and your colleagues handled that situation. I've never seen anything like it. We learned long ago that size isn't everything," Chen replied. "Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to think about it differently than everyone else." As they walked, Zara realized that she was no longer looking at a simple diplomat. She was walking beside a representative of a species that had climbed to the top of their world's food chain not through strength or natural weapons, but through intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to work together better than any other creature in the galaxy. The universe was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't what they appeared to be, but what they had always been, the most successful predators ever to reach for the stars. The emergency meeting that followed the morning's events was unlike anything Zara had ever witnessed in her diplomatic career. The atmosphere in the conference hall had completely changed. Where once there had been casual dismissal of the human delegation, now there was a tension that everyone could feel. The Vorthic separatists had been taken to the medical bay, their injuries treated with the same care that would be given to any other beings. But the message their defeat had sent rippled through every species delegation on the ship. The humans hadn't just defended themselves. They had done something that many had thought impossible. Tak, the massive Kregan war chief, was the first to break the silence. His rocky features seemed thoughtful as he looked across the table at Ambassador Chen. "I have fought in over 100 battles," Tak said slowly, his voice lacking its usual thunder. "I have seen warriors from dozens of species, but I have never seen anything like what your people did today." Chen remained as calm as ever, his hands folded peacefully on the table. "We did what was necessary to protect everyone on this ship, 8 armed Vorthic." Another delegate whispered, taken down by 5 beings half their size, using no weapons. Zara watched the reactions around the room with scientific fascination. The shift in how everyone viewed humans was dramatic and immediate. Species that had barely acknowledged their presence yesterday were now studying them with intense interest. "Perhaps," said the lead Altarian delegate, "we should discuss the real reason we're all here. The question of whether humanity deserves representation in the Galactic Council." A murmur went through the assembled delegates. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. But the context had changed completely from what anyone had expected. Chen stood slowly, and for the first time since the meetings began, the room fell completely silent. Everyone was listening. "Before this morning," Chen began, "many of you saw us as small, weak creatures who had somehow stumbled into space travel. I understand that perspective. We don't look like warriors. We don't have natural armor or weapons. We're not the biggest or the strongest." He paused, looking round the room at faces that now watched him with respect rather than dismissal. "But our planet taught us something different about survival. On Earth, being the biggest predator doesn't guarantee success. Being the most adaptable does. We learned to use our minds, to work together, to find solutions that others might miss." Zara found herself nodding as Chen spoke. Everything she had observed over the past few days was falling into place. "We became the dominant species on our world, not by conquering everything in our path, but by outlasting it, by being more persistent, more creative, more willing to change when change was needed." The Vorthic official delegate, clearly embarrassed by his separatist cousin's actions, spoke up. "The individuals who attacked you believe that might makes right, that only physical power matters in the galaxy." Chen's expression grew more serious. "We've learned that the most dangerous creatures are often the ones that don't look dangerous. A small virus can bring down the mightiest warrior. A tiny change in thinking can reshape an entire civilization." As the discussion continued, Zara began taking notes furiously. This wasn't just a diplomatic meeting anymore. It was a lesson in understanding what true strength actually meant. "On our world," Chen continued, "we had to compete with creatures much larger and more powerful than us. Massive predators with claws like swords, thick hides that could stop any natural weapon. But we survived because we could do something they couldn't." "What was that?" asked a delegate from a species Zara didn't recognize. "We could imagine tomorrow." Chen replied simply, "We could plan. We could work together. We could adapt faster than anything else on the planet. When the environment changed, we changed with it. When new challenges appeared, we found new solutions." The room was completely quiet now. Even the usually boisterous Kregan delegates were listening intently. "That's what we bring to this council," Chen said. "Not the promise that we'll dominate anyone, but the assurance that we'll find ways to solve problems that seem impossible. We'll adapt when others can't. We'll persist when others give up." Zara realized that Chen was describing exactly what she had witnessed over the past few days. The way humans moved through conflicts, finding solutions that others missed, their constant awareness and readiness to adapt to any situation. When the formal vote was called, Zara didn't hesitate. As the lead scientist on the evaluation committee, her recommendation would carry significant weight. She stood and addressed the assembly. "I came here believing that physical power was the measure of a species' worthiness," she said. "I was wrong. Humanity has shown us something more valuable than strength. They've shown us intelligence in action, adaptation under pressure, and the ability to find solutions where others see only problems. One by one, the other delegates cast their votes. When the final tally was announced, it was unanimous. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Later that evening, Zara found herself once again walking with Ambassador Chen through the ship's corridors. The formal ceremonies were over, and tomorrow the human delegation would return to Earth with news of their success. "I owe you an apology," Zara said as they walked. "I made assumptions about your species based on appearance alone." Chen smiled, the same mysterious expression she had been seeing all week. "No apology necessary. We're used to being underestimated. Sometimes it's actually an advantage." "How so?" "When people think you're harmless, they don't prepare for what you're really capable of. They make mistakes. They leave openings. They give you opportunities they'd never give to someone they saw as a threat." As they reached the observation deck where this all began, Zara looked out at the stars streaming past. Tomorrow, she would return to her own world with a completely new understanding of what it meant to be a successful species. "What happens now?" she asked. Chen joined her at the window, looking out at the infinite expanse of space. "Now we get to work. There are a lot of problems in this galaxy that could use some creative solutions. A lot of challenges that might need a different kind of thinking." Zara nodded, finally understanding what humanity truly brought to the galactic community. Not conquest or domination, but something far more valuable. The promise that no problem was unsolvable. No challenge too great, no situation too impossible to overcome. The universe was about to discover that its newest members were exactly what it had been waiting for, even if it hadn't known it yet.